I look at that and I think the guy can't hold a job, or he's a hell of a lot older than he thinks he is. Anyway, thank you all very much for inviting me here today. Obviously, the main reason I'm here today is I'm not a furniture expert. I do sit around a lot, but Bew White was my college roommate, which has a lot of good things about it and a lot of bad things about it, but I was there when he did his first and best sale ever, and that was he convinced Wendy to marry him. And I was there when William got diapered for the first time by Bew. You're lucky to be alive. I mean, that could have scarred you forever. And I remember when she was this cute little quiet baby. Oh, I love it. But one of the things that's kind of fun about Bew and I was when we were in college, we both studied to do something else. We were not planning to do what we wound up doing. I was a pre-law major, and then there was a day when I woke up and I went, I don't want to be a lawyer, I just want to play one on TV. So I decided to go into show business, and so I learned my show business career the hard way, same way Bew learned this particular business, the hard way. But it's the hard that makes it good, and so that's what I wanted to share with you today, and that's sort of my little theme. It's the hard that makes it good. Overcoming the biggest problems are when you have the biggest successes, and that's the case in show business, and I'm sure it's the case in your business. Do you all remember the movie A League of Their Own? Tom Hanks, do you remember that line? When one of the female ball players says, I don't want to play baseball anymore, it's too hard. And he goes, it's too hard. Of course it's hard. Baseball's hard. That's what makes it good. It's the hard that makes it good. And that's sort of what happens. I think when you overcome a problem, you have your biggest success. And I'm going to share a few of my Hollywood stories where what seemed like insurmountable problems wound up turning out to be the best successes that you could possibly have. And I'll start with one that's particular to me. Remember, I just told you I had no background in the entertainment industry. And so the first thing I learned when I went to New York to become an actor was that when you went into an audition, there would be a bunch of casting directors sitting there. And the first thing they said to you, to the actor who walked in there was, what have you done? Well, I hadn't done anything. I had nothing. This is where you were supposed to say, I just got off of Broadway, or I just did something, in regional theater, or I studied at Yale or Juilliard, or I was the third tree from the left in the elementary school pageant. You had to have something, but I had nothing. And these guys weren't looking at you. They were bending down looking at your picture. They wouldn't even look you in the face. But one of the other things they said to me was, where are you from? And I paused one time and I said, I don't know. And they all looked at me like, what? The guy looked up and I said, I don't know where I'm from. Now the guy's trying to figure out right at this point, how crazy am I? And what I was really thinking about was I'm a military brat. I was born in Alabama, but I never lived here. I lived all around the world. I didn't have one particular home. And so I then thought, okay, I'm not going to pad the resume by telling him about things I never did as an actor. I'm going to just talk about the fact that I lived around the world. So I then sort of did what I would call a little bitty lie. He said, why'd you live around the world? I said, well, my dad was a spy. It's the first thing came to my mind, why not? If you're going to lie, just go for it. So I said, and he goes, really? And I said, oh yeah. He had an office in the basement of the embassy, and it was chained, you couldn't get in there. And we often had to leave countries in the dark of night. And I went on and on and on, and I took up all of the time where I was supposed to talk about my credits as an actor, talking about my dad being a spy and traveling all around the world. The point is, they all remembered me. I changed the agenda. I changed it to what I wanted to talk about. I changed it to what was something I had to talk about, and I found out that everybody remembered me. And I used to walk into auditions for the next 5 years, and people would go, oh yeah, you're the son of the spy. And I'd go, yeah. But I was acting and entertaining right at that point, and I realized that my job in an audition was to sell, and the only product I had to sell was me. So I had to figure out what it was about me that could make them remember me. And it wasn't going to be the parts I played because I hadn't played them. It was going to be what my agenda was. Now I want to tell you another show business story about sales or winning. This is probably one of the greatest guys in my industry. His name was Roger King. And I don't know if any of you have heard of the name King World Productions. King World is the distributor of Oprah, Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, probably the most successful television entertainment distribution company in the world. And Roger King is the guy. He's almost an idiot savant because he is a king of research. And let me speak about that for just a second, research, because I think it's so important, having information. You all remember what the Clinton campaign's motto was? Anybody remember? Remember when Clinton was running for president, James Carville put a sign up in the campaign headquarters. Does anybody remember it? It said, "It's the economy, stupid." And he was trying to keep everybody focused on exactly what you were supposed to be focused on. And in Hollywood, the William Morris Agency, you've probably heard of the William Morris Agency, the big talent agency, they have a huge sign when you walk in their door and it says, "Information is king." And their belief is the more information you have, the more chance you have of winning. And I'm a real believer in that. And I'm also amazed when sometimes young kids come in to interview with me and they know nothing about me. And I'm thinking, in this internet world, you're coming in for a job interview and you didn't go find out who I am or what I've done to say something. And then yet there's other kids who come in and say, "Hey, you went to Auburn University." I go, okay, this kid did his background research. Research is important. So Roger King was the king of research. And here's where he made his money. I think this is such a great story for overcoming a huge problem. Roger King's father was in the entertainment industry. He bought the rights to the Little Rascals. Y'all remember the Little Rascals? Well, the Little Rascals were what they used to call film shorts. And they would show these little films before a movie in a movie theater. When TV came into existence, Roger's father thought, hey, this would be good on TV. So he bought the rights for the Little Rascals on TV. And so Roger inherited that from his dad, but he had to expand his business. He only had one offering, Little Rascals. If he didn't increase it, where was he going to share the overhead? So the problem he had was the high cost of creating a new product to take to the market. Well, he got lucky, and then he got smart. Merv Griffin had created a show called Wheel of Fortune, and he was running it on the network in the morning, and it was the third-rated program. It was a loser. It ran against Price is Right and Concentration. Remember those game shows? And this one didn't go anywhere. Well, he wanted to take it into syndication, offering it to stations to run in the afternoon and the evening. And he couldn't find anybody who would take it because all the traditional players said, okay, this show sucks. We're just not going to take it. So Roger King got it. So what Roger King did was he went out to sell it, and he quickly realized that independent stations that run children's programs and movies, they didn't have any place for it in their lineup. And the network affiliates that would traditionally run a game show, they didn't have any place either. They were running network programming, and then they would run local news, and then they ran network news at 7 o'clock. All three of the network affiliates did, and then they ran their prime time. So Roger had to come up with a reason why these people should take Wheel of Fortune. And what he did was he went into them and he said, hey, there's nothing wrong with your newscast that makes you number 3 in the market. This is what he did. He targeted the people who were number 3 in the market. He said, there's nothing wrong with your newscast. There's nothing wrong with the nightly news that's number 3 in the market. You're just not looking at your customer in the right way. And they were all like, what? He did this, by the way, in Cleveland, Ohio. He said, people in Cleveland want to smile and laugh sooner in the day than you're allowing them to do that. So they went, well, what do you mean? So he said, why don't you take the nightly news at 7 o'clock and move it to 6:30. Give them a choice to get the nightly news 30 minutes earlier. And then at 7 o'clock, they want to laugh and smile. Give them Wheel of Fortune game show to start their day off earlier. Well, this particular station had looked at their newscast and tried to improve it, and they couldn't. They tried to improve the marketing of the network news, and it didn't make any difference. They had nothing to lose. He gave them a new way of looking at their problem. And so this station, it was an ABC affiliate, moved ABC World News Tonight to 6:30 at night, and all of a sudden, people in Cleveland wanted to see news earlier. And so he put Wheel of Fortune in at 7 opposite Walter Cronkite and NBC Nightly News, and given the choice of those two newscasts and Wheel of Fortune, what do you think they picked? Wheel of Fortune. And so all of a sudden it turned everything around for this station, and the station realized their problem wasn't bad production of their film or their newscast, and it wasn't bad marketing of the network newscast. It was not completely understanding their audience. And so when they changed, the rest is history. And now I don't think there's a single city in the country now that puts their newscast at 7 o'clock. Everybody's moved it. So it was a business success in the entertainment industry by just reevaluating the audience. Which reminds me of another story I want to quickly tell you. I met a guy who was vice president of international sales for Foster's Lager. Are you all familiar with Foster's Lager? You ever been to Outback? It's the Australian beer, right? I met this guy, and he said he had planned to introduce, his job was to introduce Foster's Lager into the US market. And so they did a whole television commercial and a whole campaign with Paul Hogan. Now, Paul Hogan, you remember, was Crocodile Dundee, but this was before Crocodile Dundee had ever even come to the United States. So they went out and they tested the commercials, and here's what the testing said. The testing says, Americans don't think Australians know anything about beer. Americans won't buy a product from a foreign spokesperson. And what the hell is put the shrimp on the Barbie mean? So he thought, I have got a major disaster. I can't sell this. So he decided to look at it a different way. He hired a testing company to test the American testing company to see what the testing would really show. And what they found out was market testing really tells you what someone is used to and what they will accept. It doesn't tell you what if they would buy something they've never heard of. You follow me on that? So he decided, I believe in this product. I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to take a shot at it. And if I lose, I, flip burgers at McDonald's. So he took a shot, and it was the most successful launch in the history of any product, international product, bringing it into the United States. And then Paul Hogan became the #1 spokesperson for product in the entire world. It was just another way of taking a look at your product and positioning it in a way that you're confident in. By the same token, when people come in to me and pitch ideas as a television production company owner, I get kids that come in and they say, hey, I have a show and it's just like American Idol. Or I've got a show and it's just like the TV show Modern Family, only it's different. Whenever I hear that, I think, that's not going to work. You've devalued your product right there. You're telling me your product is like something else that's successful. Why isn't it that? So what I love is when someone comes in the door to me and says, I've got a television show, it's never been seen, it's never been done. This is the most unique and wonderful product you've ever seen. This is the show that will change and revolutionize TV. When people start that way, they've got a chance. And the list of shows like that are amazing. All in the Family, The Dick Van Dyke Show, The Cosby Show, Survivor, all of these shows were failures in somebody's eyes. I mean, you take The Cosby Show, it was developed by ABC Television, which was the #1 television network at the time. And they looked at it and said, this is not going to work. It's too different. Audiences don't understand this very successful, wealthy black doctor. So NBC, which was the 3rd-rated network at the time, said, what we got to lose? So NBC picked up The Cosby Show, and the rest is history. It became the #1 sitcom of all time. So you got to look at things a little bit differently and take a chance and be willing to step out. Now, I'll share another story with you about Alton Entertainment. In this little video you saw, Alton Entertainment was the company that I started, and we did something very unique, and this is what the Wall Street Journal wrote about, and it's why I wound up selling my company. Bew was right to tell you about my ex-wife from Chile. Her father, by the way, said to me, when I went to him and I asked for his daughter's hand in marriage, the first thing he said to me was, well, I would never want her to marry an American foreigner, but if she has to marry one, you're okay. I said, great. He goes, but are you sure you want to marry her? And I said, why? And he goes, my daughter is like a thoroughbred racehorse. You're going to enjoy the ride, but the maintenance is going to kill you. And it did. Oh, yeah. Who was it, Jeff Foxworthy? Says, so next time you get married, just buy her a house and give it to her. Anyway, but I found myself in Miami Beach divorced and trying to figure out what I could do in Miami Beach, and I decided Miami Beach was becoming this trendy, really cool place for fashion. So I was going to create a fashion television show, and nobody else had done it on TV. And I had a friend, Kenneth Cole, a shoe designer, who had become buddies of mine, and he thought it'd be a good idea to do a fashion TV, and I went out and pitched it, and you know what everybody said to me? Loser, this is not going to work. You can't put fashion on TV. And I said, why? And they said, by the very definition, it's going to get a bad rating. I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, fashion only appeals to women. Men aren't going to watch this. Children aren't going to watch this. You're going to get a low rating, which means you're going to get a very low revenue stream from your television commercial sales. You got a loser of an idea. I thought, okay, back to the drawing board. So I sat there and tried to figure out how I was going to turn this fashion television show into something that would actually generate a bigger audience. I was looking at the traditional model of television and trying to figure out how to succeed, when in fact, that wasn't the way to look at it. One night, I watched Entertainment Tonight, right? I'm watching it. It's about 7.5 segments in a half hour, and it's all about books, movies, TV shows, with a little gossip thrown in. I thought, wow, this show is about goods and sales. It's all about product. The people whose movies are being talked about ought to pay for that privilege. And then it came up. I thought, well, I'll do a show about fashion and beauty, and I'll go to Donna Karan and Calvin Klein, and I'll ask them to pay for the privilege of being in my show. And so then I'll have a second revenue stream. So I have the first revenue stream of the commercials, but then I have the second revenue stream by embedding the product messaging in my show about those products. That was my idea. Well, the first thing I thought was, I got to clear this by the FCC because nobody's done that, the Federal Communications Commission. Now at the time, this is the Reagan administration, the FCC was headed by Michael Powell, Colin Powell's son, and they had just deregulated the communications business. Are you all familiar with this? This is when they said, we're going to make the marketplace better for business. We're going to throw out a bunch of regulations. And it was right. It did help the business and make it the marketplace better for business. What it did do, this is the negative side of all that deregulation, was they threw out all the regulations about what you could say on TV, what you could see on TV, how many minutes of commercials could be in a half hour, which is why that deregulation was good for the business marketplace, but I'm not so sure it was good for the product. That's why we have shows like Honey Boo Boo, Duck Dynasty, and infomercials. But anyway, the FCC gave me the go-ahead. They said, there's no reason why you can't do product, in conversation in the show. So I changed the paradigm, and the Interpublic company bought my company because they saw the future changing. And that big future that's been changing all these last couple of years, there was a major tipping point in my business, and I think this might be relevant for you all. It happened last Thursday, August 1st. And I'll tell you about the tipping point in 1 second, but let me give you the background. When I started in the business, there were only 3 television networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC. That was it. You might have an independent station in your market, but those were your 3 choices, right? Well, in people who lived in the middle of Wyoming, nowhere, they couldn't get that broadcast signal sent to them with their little rabbit ears and everything. So they invented something in the 60s called cable. And they ran a cable out to that guy on the farm. It was cheaper to run cable to him to give him TV than it was to increase the power on the broadcast signal. So cable in the 60s was just for people who lived in rural areas. But that's about the time in Manhattan that they started making buildings out of steel and glass instead of bricks. And now all of a sudden, you couldn't get a decent broadcast signal in Manhattan. So in about 1970, a guy named Chuck Dolan got permission from the city of New York to run cable into apartments in New York, and he called it Manhattan Cable. And so now people in New York got cable, and they got their 3 broadcast affiliates, but there was extra space on the cable, so he created a channel that would do nothing but show movies 24 hours a day. Oh, how revolutionary. Everybody thought it was kind of a joke because the studios wouldn't give him the rights to any good movies. He ran old bad movies, B movies. But he called this Home Box Office, HBO. Well, the rest is history. I mean, that was the first cable channel, and now we have more cable networks than we have broadcast networks. And so over the last 20 years, the share of the audience from broadcast has been dropping precipitously, while the share of the television audience watching cable has gone. And about 10 or 12 years ago, that changed. So now more people watch cable television than they watch broadcast television. And broadcast networks, as we know it, are going away. But last Thursday, the biggest tipping point happened. Last Thursday, they finally came out with the research that said more people are using the internet on their phones and their pads and their computers than are watching TV. So there's going to be internet. Cable is now going to be scrambling. So all of these businesses that are based on old production models are going to be scrambling. My business has changed dramatically because of that. You know what, I'm going to digress and tell you one of the things when Interpublic bought my company, they used to have these guys that would come in and do these PowerPoint seminars like you are involved in. 15 years ago, they asked a guy named Nick Donatello from the Odyssey Group. He was a futurist. Basically, he was a hippy-dippy from, San Francisco who made money telling people what the future was going to be. But 15 years ago, he came into a meeting like this and said, I have a PowerPoint presentation for you. It's just 5 bullet points. And he said, I'm going to show them to you and then I'm going to explain. He put up the first page on the screen and it had 3 bullet points. Jesus Christ, the Industrial Revolution, the Internet. And then his second slide said, the media business, education. He said, that's it, those are my 5 slides. And then he proceeded to tell, his speech was about what was the internet going to do to us. And he said, look at that first slide. Doesn't matter whether you believe in Jesus Christ or not. It changed, Jesus Christ changed the way we interact with people. It changed the way people deal with each other in society and made us a different kind of people. Then he said, look at the Industrial Revolution. The assembly line model. It totally changed the way we did business. It used to be a village had to make everything that the village needed. Now the village could make one particular product and trade it with another village and get other products from that village that they needed. So the Industrial Revolution and its business model changed us again. And then he said, take a look at the internet. The internet is going to change the way all of us do business in the future. And he said, it doesn't matter. Right now, you guys think you know the internet, but what you're really doing is a little bit of marketing on the internet. There's a million other things that you can do because of the internet. And then he looked at the next page and he said, here are just 2 examples. Education in this country is based on the Industrial Revolution model. We take kids of a certain age and we put them in first grade. And a year later, we move them down the assembly line to second grade. And then a year later, we move them down the assembly line to third grade. He said, that's a lousy way to educate. Some of those kids should have been moved down the assembly line a whole lot earlier than a year. Some of them need 2 years to move down to the next level. So whoever comes up with a way to use the internet to change education so that everybody can learn and grow and get educated in their time is going to revolutionize education. Same thing with the media business. The media business is based on, or was, based on aggregating the largest audience possible. And therefore we dumb down our programs, make them as stupid as possible so that the largest audience can see it. Therefore, we charge the largest amount of money for our commercials. Well, that's just not going to exist anymore. We've got to get to a place now where our programming meets the exact needs of everybody who has a particular desire to see something. It's why programs like Duck Dynasty are coming into the, I don't get Duck Dynasty, it doesn't work for me, but it works for a heck of a lot of other people. And if there are enough people who like Duck Dynasty who buy duck call equipment, the show's gonna work. So thinking of things totally different because of the internet is something that I don't even think we've scratched the surface going forward. By the way, July 20th, 1969, 44 years ago, what happened?
Went to the moon.
Went to the moon, right? July 20th, 1969, just passed about 2 weeks ago, we landed on the moon. I don't know where you all were. I was sitting on a porch, sort of watching television and trying to kiss Buttons Pulaski. I don't think I was successful at either one. But anyway, I remember this cute girl and watching TV and trying to decide what was more important to me. But I did think at the time that landing on the moon was the most revolutionary thing that had ever happened. And by this time in my life, I fully expected to live on the moon. I don't know what you thought. But I thought it was going to totally change our life. Do you know what happened? What else happened in July 1969? Anybody have a clue? It was the solution to a problem. A couple of military scientists had a problem. Their problem was, how do we get a scientist who lives in Cleveland, Ohio, access to one of our supercomputers at MIT or Stanford so that he can use the extra computing time of a supercomputer? And so the ARPA, the Advanced Research Projects Agency of the military, came up with an idea that they nicknamed ARPANET. And what they did was they solved their problem by figuring out a way to transfer packets of information over phone lines so that somebody in Cleveland over the phone could use his computer to talk to the computer in Stanford and MIT. The internet was born the exact same time we landed on the moon. What changed our life more? You make the decision. I know what changed my life more, which was a little surprising. I'm probably way over on time, or am I doing okay? Well, I want to tell you, I've shown you, hopefully, just a couple of examples in my particular business of where thinking literally outside the box and trying to solve a problem, defining what that problem is, and looking at it in a whole different way, how it will change your business. And I know that if you look at things that way, it will change your business. But the other two things I want to talk to you about are kind of fun. My mother that I mentioned used to have all sorts of expressions for me, and one of them was, every now and then a blind pig gets an acorn. Y'all ever heard that one? Every now and then a blind pig gets an acorn. And what she's trying to say is there is going to be a certain amount of luck, divine providence, karma, whatever you want to call it, that's going to happen in your life, and you should embrace it. And take advantage of the good fortune. When things are going good, take advantage of it and go forward. And the other thing I want to mention to you is balance. I found that in the entertainment industry, one of the things that makes me the most excited is when people walk up to me and they say, "Oh, I recognize you from TV, but I just wanted to tell you, you're kind of a normal person." And I think, what does that mean? And basically what they're saying is that, I drive a truck and I have a pontoon boat, and I'm not the Hollywood People magazine kind of stereotypical kind of guy. And I think that's important, having that balance in your life, so that when you are trying to do sales, you're trying to do marketing, you're trying to do that, you know what's important to you. And the best example that I can give you with that is what I want to close with. This is a story that I've told Bew before, and it was probably one of the most exciting evenings of my life. It was 3 months after Ronald Reagan left office. George Herbert Walker Bush had just become president of the United States. And I had an opportunity to meet the most successful Hollywood actor of all time, Ronald Reagan. Somebody who succeeded in the entertainment business and succeeded in the political arena. I went to a party where a Hollywood lady was celebrating her marriage to this other guy in the entertainment industry. And there were about 25 or 30 people in this meeting, or this party, and they were all sort of young Hollywood types my age, and they were all full of themselves, and they were all talking about their latest success and what they had done. And I was getting a little bored with this, and so I decided to leave the party, and as I went to the front door, in walked 4 or 5 of the beefiest football player kind of guys I'd ever seen in my life, and I was thinking, who are these guys? And all of a sudden I realized they were Secret Service agents. And it was because the guy, the groom, his father had been an early, important campaign contributor to Ronald Reagan, and so Ronald Reagan was going to come to this party. So I stood there, and then all of a sudden, in walks the president and Nancy Reagan, and they said hello to the bride and groom and the parents, and I just watched this. And then all of a sudden, the president says to the bride and groom, well, I better go say hello to the rest of the folks. And he turns, and I'm the first one in the room, and he looks at me and he goes, hey, my name is Ronnie Reagan. What's yours? And I thought, you know, what rock did he think I was under for the last 8 years? Of course I know he's Ronnie Reagan. So what did I say? Hey, I'm Mikey Young. Well, I watched him work the room. And Ronald Reagan worked this room of 20-somethings, people my age, 30s I guess we were, worked the room, and I thought, man, he's not stopped campaigning yet. He's still out there meeting and greeting and learning who people were. And I watched him ask people questions constantly. And then I saw him go over by the piano where one girl at this party was talking to him, and the rest of my Hollywood buddies were too snooty to listen. So I thought, well, I'm going to go talk to the president. How many chances do you get? So I walked over to where President Reagan was standing, and I walked up, and she was asking him, what's the coolest thing about being president? Where did you go that was the most? She was asking him all these questions about what was the neatest thing to be president of the United States. So I thought I would ask the opposite. And this is where I learned about balance. I said to him, I said, Mr. President, what was the worst thing about being president of the United States? He goes, that's easy. I said, really? He said, yes. He said, as long as I've been in politics, I love my wife so much, I can never stand when people say nasty things about her. It bothers me more than anything else. You never get used to it. It never gets easier. I don't like it when people talk about my wife. And he said, the other thing is, I don't like it when boys and girls had to die on my watch. It really hurt every time. So I thought about that, and I thought, wow, I thought he was going to say Congress did this, or we didn't get this passed, or the press didn't do that. But what did he consider, you know, the most important things? It was personal stuff. Somebody talking about his wife and somebody dying. Of course, being a television interviewer, I had to ask more questions. So I said, Mr. Reagan, President Reagan, why do you think they didn't like Nancy? He goes, you know, it's that two-China policy. Do you remember the two-China policy? When Nancy Reagan came into the White House, she discovered that there was not one complete set of White House china, and so that matched. So she went and got her rich friends, this is Ronald Reagan telling me, she went and got her rich friends, didn't cost the taxpayer any money, but the rich friends put up all the money and bought a complete set of new china for the White House, and they called it our two-China policy. And so I said to President Reagan, I said, well, Mr. President, why did we not have a complete set of china? He goes, well, I asked that question too. And I said, well, what was the answer? He says, they steal it. I said, what? He says, people who come to a state dinner steal it. And I said, how do they know that? He goes, well, I asked that question too. He says, the Secret Service took me down into the basement and they showed me videotapes. And here was Shevardnadze taking a butter plate and putting it in his pocket. And I thought, well, why didn't they just confront him and ask him for the butter plate? And he goes, well, I asked that too. He says, they weren't going to make an international incident over a butter plate. So I said, well, how did you solve the problem? He goes, well, it's the dumbest idea, but it was the simplest. He said, we made a new set of china, and we included an ashtray with the same pattern, and on top of it we put matches with a presidential seal and my signature. And of course you can't smoke in the White House, So we had this ashtray and the matches on top of everybody's place setting, and we just sort of passed the word, steal the ashtray, steal the ashtray. I understand that, and I said, now the other thing you mentioned was about American boys and girls losing their life. How did you deal with that? And he said, well, I don't know if you know this, but if you're an American service person and you lose your life in the service of this country, you get a letter from the President of the United States. And it's a signed letter that the family gets. And he said, usually that's done by auto pen. But they came to me the very first time an American serviceman died on my watch. And they said, do you want us to use the auto pen or do you want to sign the letter? And he said, oh, I'll sign the letter. He said, in fact, get me the parents on the phone. And President Reagan said they actually put the parents on the line, and he thanked them for their child's service and everything they had done for the country. And he said they cried, and he said, I cried with them, but when I got off the phone, I know that I had actually done something for them. And so he said, I made a proclamation at that point. I said, I will talk to the parents of everybody who dies on my watch. And I said, wow, I bet you had to do that a couple of times. And he said, you know, you never realize it, but when the 200 Marines were killed at that barracks in Beirut, he said, it's not 200 sets of parents. In our day, that's 300 sets of parents. Sometimes more than that, because families are, made up. And he said, I got a lot of people on the phone. I said, how did you do that? Did you talk to all of those parents? And he said, well, no. He said, about a third of them would get on the phone and I'd say, hi, this is Ronnie Reagan, I just want to talk to you. And they'd go, yeah, right, you think this is funny? And they'd hang up. And he said about a third of them would start screaming at me, profanity. And he said, as long as they didn't cross the line, actually threaten me, he said, I stayed on the line with them, and eventually they would stop cussing at me and they would thank me for talking to them on the phone. He said about a third of them just needed a little bit of a cry. And I said, boy, that must have been incredibly hard. And he said, well, it's the hard that made it good. It's what made it worth it to him, being able to find that hard challenge and change people's lives by doing something that was not necessarily called for. And I realized right there what a balance he had in his life. Anyway, I'll end it there. Thank you all very much for allowing me to come speak to you and tell you some of my stories.